everyone, J-Pal here, enjoying day 2 of Holy Week. This is Holy Monday now. We're getting a sense of what happened during this special week and what it was like for those involved. After his triumphal entrance into Jerusalem, Jesus and his disciples spent the night in Bethany, a town about 2 miles east of Jerusalem. This was the home of Lazarus, whom Jesus had raised from the dead, and his 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. They were close friends of Jesus and probably hosted him and his disciples during their final days in Jerusalem. I'll put a link below to an aerial view of Bethany, Bethphage, and the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem for your perspective. It's very interesting to see. Okay, after a good night's rest in Bethany, they began the 2 to 3 mile trek to Jerusalem and the temple where the next activities would take place. It says in Mark 11:12-14, "Now the next day when they had come from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing from afar a fig tree having leaves, he went to see if perhaps he would find something on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. In response, Jesus said to the tree, 'Let no one eat fruit from you ever again.' And his disciples heard it. So this morning, he curses a fig tree because it failed to bear fruit." It's a bit hard to understand why he was so harsh on this fig tree, but it obviously was symbolic and representative of the greater message he was getting for his country, his people that he loved. This seemingly insignificant encounter with the fig tree would result in one of the Bible's most amazing teachings on faith, power, and our authority over the natural world. Stay tuned for tomorrow's happy ending and teaching to this sad encounter. So Jesus began this day's work by cleansing the temple, the outer court in particular, the court of the Gentiles, where everybody had access to worship. Here the Bible has it explained in 3 of the Gospels as happening at the end of his ministry in Holy Week. John talks about it in John chapter 2 of happening at the beginning of his ministry. So it does seem that this happened more than once, the beginning and the end of his ministry. So Mark 11:15-18, one of the accounts says, "So they came to Jerusalem. Then Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves." Interestingly enough, Jesus made no distinction between those who bought and sold, but drove them both out. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares through the temple. Verse 16, Jesus further stopped people from using the temple grounds as a convenient shortcut into the city to do their business, which violated the sanctity of the temple. He probably at this time gave detailed instruction on the divine purpose of the temple, after which he protested strongly about what was going on there. It says, "Then he taught, saying to them, 'Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations? But you have made it a den of thieves.'" Here he's quoting references from the scripture. Isaiah 56:7, "Mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people." He also loosely quotes Jeremiah 7:11, accusing the people of making the temple into a den of thieves. Through their fraudulent practices, overcharging, overpricing, the temple had become a refuge for marauders. They were using it as a shield to protect their evil, cheating practices. And the scribes and chief priests heard it and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people were astonished, amazed at his teaching. That was verse 18. Jesus' attack against the market and exchange activities incensed the temple leadership, and they joined with the scribes in active hostility, which were to lead directly to his arrest and crucifixion. Now, amazingly enough, this is like having the whole government and social media against you, because these were the people that controlled, ran, dictated the laws and everything that went on in Israel. Within the Roman context, of course, but they were really the ones running everything. Everything in Israel happened around this temple. Okay, at the close of every day, including this one, the hard day of casting out and teaching, it says that when it was time for the gates to be shut, Jesus retired with his disciples back to Bethany. Luke mentions that he retired daily to spend the night on the Mount of Olives. So it might be inferred that at least part of the evenings were spent in solitude on the mountain praying. We don't hear a lot about it in scriptures, but there are indications everywhere of him taking time alone with his Father for guidance, refilling and recharging, culminating in his garden prayer shortly before his crucifixion and resurrection. I pray that you are finding time in your busy schedules for refilling and direction, which undoubtedly, along with his knowledge of the Word and his purpose on earth and heavenly calling, were undoubtedly how he found his way through this tumultuous time in his life and the history of our race. Learn from his sample. Take time with your Father. He loves you and wants to speak to you.